Hi, I'm DK.
And I'm Ben.
And today we're going to be walking you through March of the Ants.
March of the Ants is a game from Weird City Games in which players take on the role of an ant colony and spread out their colony over the meadow.
Today we'll demonstrate a regular 3-player game.
Food is represented by the circular brown tokens. Centipedes are represented by the centipede tokens, which on the back have a wormhole. Centipedes and wormholes are placed through certain cards and actions and on certain hexes. Each colony has a specific color of ant and larva, represented by the cubes. When a cube is in the larva chamber, it is considered a larva, and whenever a cube is on the Great Meadow, it is considered an ant. The Great Tunnel is the center of the meadow and the place of origin of all the ant colonies. The meadow is the field that the ants will explore, colonize, and collect resources from in order to win the game. The Great Tunnel counts as a hex. Players may always place larvae into the Great Tunnel as the result of an explore action, a march action, or a card effect. The Great Tunnel can never be contested and battles will never take place there. The Great Tunnel also features a round track. To begin the game, place the round marker on the first round. At the end of each round, we advance the round marker one space, and at the end of the final round, the game ends. Each ant colony may also place one ant into the Great Tunnel.
These hexes are what the colonies use to explore the Great Meadow. Randomly select 2 starting hexes, the ones with the gold border, per player, shuffle and place them face down on top of the standard hex pile. Each hex has a name and a number. Also, each hex has an exit and entrance tunnel, located here and here. The collection sites are defined by the image next to them. We have food, larva, double larva, a point, and drawing a card. The stars here with the black stars represents the controlling collection site of that hex. Some sites might have a wormhole or a centipede.
There are 3 types of cards in March of the Ants: event cards, colony goals, and evolution. Each card has the type of the card written at the top and a color denoting what type of card it is. Each card also has a name. The number to the right of the name is the cost of the card, which can be paid with ants or larvae, or any combination thereof. The number below the name, inside the black starburst, is the ferocity value of the card, which can be used to add to an army's battle strength. At the bottom of the card, each card's effect is explained. Event cards are cards played that have an instant effect on the game and are then discarded. Colony goals are played next to the nest mat and stay there, helping a player gain points. Evolution cards are played onto the appropriate body segment on the player's nest mat. At the beginning of the game, all the cards are shuffled into the deck, and each player is dealt 2 cards. This is the nest mat. Each player starts the game with a nest mat. At the beginning of the game, each player puts 5 cubes in the larva chamber to denote 5 larvae, and 2 food in the food stores. The nest mat has most of the rules needed to play the game on it. It outlines each phase, starting with the worker phase, the soldier phase, the queen phase, and slumber, and it has each action possible to take in the worker phase along the side of the mat. To take an action, the player pays the cost, which is either 1 food for explore, march, or forage, or the ant or larva cost on the card they wish to play. Resting has no cost, and in addition, gives the player 1 resource, depending on the number of times they've rested. The first time a player rests, they gain 1 larva, the second time 1 food, and each subsequent turn they rest, they gain an additional food. The player nest also has an ant body for each player, where evolutions are placed. When you place an evolution onto an ant body, you simply cover up that section with the evolution. If you decide to play an additional evolution, that second evolution covers up the first one. Evolving each body segment gives not only the power printed on the card, but also an additional bonus depending on the type of segment. For instance, each abdomen evolution a player has played adds an additional ant that player can feed with every food. Abdomen evolutions help you feed your ant. Thorax evolution give you additional marching power, and head evolutions help you in battle. On the right side of the nest mat is the stash, where you stash your colony goals. You may play up to 2 colony goals here. If you play a third one, you must discard one of your current colony goals.
I'll be going first for the yellow player. The yellow player is going to choose to explore, which costs 1 food. And I turn over a hex and reveal the dry seep, which I can place anywhere on an adjacent hex that I have an ant in. Now right now I only have an ant in the Great Tunnel, so I'm going to play it off the Great Tunnel. You have to play it where the tunnels connect, so this is a legal play, but this is also a legal play. You can have it not connect on some part. As long as one trail does connect, you're okay. I'm going to choose to do it this way, and now I get to move any amount of ants from an adjacent hex into this new hex, which I only have 1 ant, but I will move it into the controlling site right there, which means I get a point later, and I get to collect a food during the harvest phase. There is a reaction to exploring, which means that each other player gets to place a larva from their larva chamber onto a hex that they already have an ant in. So the red will put it into the Great Tunnel, and the same with the blue. And this ends the yellow player's turn.
It is now the red player's turn. First, we move the active player marker in front of the red player's nest mat. The red player chooses to play a card. The red player plays the Scouting Thorax Evolution. To play an evolution, you simply take the card and you place it on the nest mat over the appropriate section. This evolution is a Scouting Thorax, so it goes over the middle section, the thorax. Playing a card does not cost food. Instead, it costs the number of ants or larvae indicated on the card, in this case, 1. The red player may pay this cost either with 1 larva from the larva chamber or by removing 1 ant from the Great Meadow. The red player chooses to pay with a larva. So he takes 1 larva and returns it to his supply. Now, each other player gets to react. They may discard a card from their hand to draw a new card. The blue player chooses to do this, discarding 1 card and drawing a new card. The yellow player decides to keep the hand that they have. Now the red player's turn is over, and we move the active player marker to the blue player.
For the blue player, they will decide to explore, which costs 1 food, and they get to turn over a new hex. They turn over the grasslands, which they can play on any hex that they already have an ant in, and we'll play it like this. Now they can move any amount of ants into the new hex. They have 2 ants, so they will move 1 into the control site and 1 into the food collection site. Now the other players get to react. The yellow player will move 1 larva into a hex which they have an ant in, into this one, and automatically going into the collection site. And the red ant will place a larva into the Great Tunnel. This ends the blue player's turn.
It is now the yellow player's second turn. The yellow player chooses to explore again, paying 1 food and drawing the top hex. It is the Stony Mound, and the yellow player chooses to place it here. Now, the yellow player has an interesting choice to make. The control site is a double larva site, which is valuable, and also provides a point at the end of the turn. However, food in the early game can be the most valuable resource, because food is what allows you to do the most effective actions during the worker phase. In this case, the yellow player decides that 2 larvae in 1 point and the control site is worth more than the food. Each other player gets a reaction and places 1 larva onto the board into a hex where they already have ants.
It's the red player's turn. The red player is going to march, which costs 1 food. Marching allows any player to move their ants 5 steps. Now, since the red player has a thorax evolution, this enhances their marching and gives them 1 extra step. So the red ant has 6 steps now. 1 from the larva chamber onto the great tunnel, and then 5 into the stony mound. They will occupy any open collection sites, leaving 2 on the outskirts. Now this hex has ants from 2 different players and not enough collection sites for all the ants, meaning it is contested and there will be battle during the soldier phase. For the reaction phase, any other player can move an ant 1 step. Now, normally in this situation, the yellow player would probably move their 1 ant to this section to avoid battle, but since we are doing a demonstration and we want to show how battle works, we're going to leave the ant there. And the blue player chooses not to move any ants from their hex.
It's the blue player's turn. The blue player is happy with their board position and so decides to take the forage action to gain more cards. Forage costs 1 food and allows the player to draw 2 cards. Each other player may react to forage by adding 1 larva from their supply to their larva chamber. This ends the blue player's turn.
It's the yellow player's turn. The yellow player is going to play a card, and the yellow player plays the proboscis head, evolving their head section. This costs 2 larvae. Now we're in the reaction phase, and any other player may discard a card to draw a card. The blue player chooses to do so. This ends the yellow player's turn.
It's the red player's turn. The red player is happy with their board position, and even though they have 1 more food, they're going to choose to rest, hoping to end the turn. When a player takes a rest action, they immediately place 1 resource of the appropriate type on the rest track. The first turn they rest, a player places 1 larva on the track, and each turn thereafter places a food on the track. After a player chooses to rest, they may only rest in their upcoming turns. Other players do not get to react to a rest action, and so this ends the red player's turn. It's the blue player's turn. The blue player chooses to play a card, another evolve card, and they will evolve the Leaf Cutter Abdomen. This costs 3, and the blue player chooses to pay it with larvae. Each other player may react by discarding a card to draw a card. The yellow player chooses not to, but the red player chooses to. This ends the blue player's turn.
For the yellow player's turn, the yellow player chooses to rest. So I put 1 larva into the first part in the resting track, and I flip over the active player token because it's the second player to rest in the worker phase. This ends the worker phase.
At the end of the worker phase, each player gets to place any resources from their rest track into their larva chamber. Now we enter the soldier phase. In this phase, there will be battle in any hexes that are contested. There's only 1 hex that's contested, the Stony Mound. So yellow and red will do battle. Battle is detailed on the player aid. The first step is to calculate army strength. Each player adds the number of ants in the hex to the number of head evolutions they have in play. Red has 5 ants in the hex and no head evolutions, so red's army strength is 5. Yellow has 1 ant in the hex and 1 head evolution, for an army strength of 2. The next step is ferocity. Starting with the invader, red, each player may discard one card face down to add to their total battle power. Red feels confident in their position and chooses not to discard a card. Yellow does choose to discard a card. The card is revealed and the ferocity is added to the army strength. Now we determine the outcome. In red's case, they have 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 for their army strength, and that is their total army strength. Yellow had an army strength of 2, plus their ferocity of 4, for a total of 6, meaning yellow wins the battle. The next step is to determine casualties. The winner loses ants equal to half of the loser's army strength, rounded down. Red's army strength is 5, so yellow would lose 2 ants, rounded down. But because yellow is the winner, they cannot lose all their ants. The winner always has a lone survivor of 1 ant, in this case the only ant yellow has. The loser, red, loses ants equal to the winner's total army strength. Yellow's army strength was 2, so red loses 1 ant. Red may remove any ant of their choice from the hex. After the battle, the winner gains the spoils. The winner gains 1 point, so yellow moves 1 space on the scoring track. Yellow also has the proboscis head, which says, when you win a battle, immediately collect 1 resource from any collection site in the hex where you battled. Yellow chooses to collect 1 food. You'll notice that even though this hex is still contested, we do not continue to battle there. 2 players may only battle once in any given hex. If this hex is still contested in the next soldier phase, next round, they will do battle again. But for now, it is finished.
We're in the queen phase, so now we collect resources. Each player collects resources for every ant that's in a collection site. For example, yellow has a collection site here. They get 1 food. And they also have 2 larvae in this site. So they get 2 larvae that they can move into their larva chamber. The red player has 2 larvae and 1 food. So they get 2 larvae and 1 food. The blue player has a larva, food, and a draw card collection site, but because they have the leafcutter abdomen, they can change up to 2 collection sites into food collection sites, meaning they could collect 3 food for the sites they have here, which the blue player is going to do, putting 3 food into their storage. This ends the harvest portion of the queen phase. During the queen phase, each player has to feed any ant out in the meadow. Now, 1 food feeds up to 4 ants. So the yellow player has 2 ants in the meadow, and so they must spend 1 food to feed those 2 ants. The red player has 4 ants in the meadow, and they also pay 1 food. The blue player has 3 ants and pays 1 food as well. And this ends the feeding portion of the queen phase. For the royal decree, each player gets to either gain 2 food or 5 larvae. The yellow player chooses to gain 2 food. The red player does the same. The blue player chooses to gain 5 larvae, putting them into their larva chamber.
During this phase, each colony gains points for each inner meadow hex they control. Yellow occupies the controlling site on 2 meadow hexes that are adjacent to the Great Tunnel, and so gains 2 points. Red controls no inner meadow hexes, so gains no points, and blue controls 1, so gains 1 point. If any player had stashed colony goals, they would also score for those. But since no player does, we advance the round marker from early spring to green growth. We flip the active player marker and we advance to the next round and begin a new worker phase. Red is going to play a colony goal. Colony goals go on the right side of the player mat in the area called stashed colony goals. You may only have 2 colony goals at a time. If you play a third colony goal, you must get rid of one of your active colony goals. Each colony goal does 2 things. The colony goal has an immediate bonus. In this case, when played, gain 4 larvae. A colony goal also has a potential bonus that you can gain during the slumber phase if you meet the criteria. In this case, each slumber gain 1 point if you have more larvae than one neighbor, or gain 2 points if you have more larvae than each neighbor. In addition, this card says must be paid with ants, which means that red must take 2 ants off of the board to pay for this card. Now red immediately gains 4 larvae, adding them to the larva chamber, and each other player may take a reaction, discarding a card to draw a card. Yellow is going to explore. Yellow decides to place the hex here. This hex has several new features. It has a crown site, which will give 1 point, regardless of whether the hex is adjacent to the Great Tunnel or not. It also has a centipede on it, meaning that we take 1 centipede token from the reserve and place it onto the hex. The centipede will do battle with any ants present in the hex during the soldier phase. Now, yellow may move ants onto the new hex from the exploring hex. And in this case, yellow has 2 hexes from which it could choose to explore, but it may only move ants from one of those hexes. Yellow decides to move from the stony mound, where it has more ants. It takes the 1 ant in the outskirts and takes one of the ants off of the single larva collection site and moves it onto the food site. We now resolve battle in the stony mound. Yellow still occupies the control site, making it the defending player. The invading player is the player with the most ants in the hex that is not the defending player. In this case, red. We add up army strength. Red has 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, and no head evolutions, so a total of 9. And yellow has 3. At this point, either player may discard a card to add ferocity to its total. Red chooses not to because it clearly outnumbers yellow, and yellow, seeing the same thing, also chooses not to. This makes red the winner, and we determine casualties. Yellow is the loser, so it inflicts casualties equal to half its army size rounded down, and red loses 1 ant. Red is the winner, and so inflicts casualties equal to its total army size, in this case 8, enough to wipe out yellow from this hex. Red immediately moves its ants into the open collection sites. We've resolved 1 battle, but the hex is still contested. Blue now has to battle red. So we count up red's army size. This time it's 8, and blue's, which is 5. Now each player has a chance to discard a card face down to add ferocity to its army size. Blue decides to discard a card, but red has no cards in hand and may not. We reveal the card and add it to blue's army size. It's a 4 plus 5 makes 9, which is enough to defeat red. This makes blue the winner, and we determine casualties. Casualties are determined before either side loses ants. So in this case, blue deals its entire army size in casualties, so 5. And red deals half of its army size in casualties, in this case 4. Red loses 5 ants of its choice, and blue loses 4.
In a battle with a centipede, the centipede's strength is determined by drawing a random card, and whatever the ferocity strength is becomes the centipede's army strength. So in this case it's a 4. Yellow has 3 ants on the hex and because of its evolved head, gets a +1, so giving it a strength of 4. Also, yellow can play one of its cards to boost its ferocity, giving it a 7. This is a +3. And then the centipede draws one more card and adds it to its strength. That's a 2, so the centipede is at 6, and the yellow player is at 7. The yellow player wins if it has an equal or greater number of army strength. In this case, it does win, and the centipede is destroyed. Also, they gain 1 food and 1 victory point.